Alright. So, Master of Ceremonies wants awkward. I will give you awkward in spades. How are we all doing tonight? Okay. Alright, so guilty pleasures. The moral of the story, I would say, is you must be proud of your guilty pleasures. You must wear them on your lapel with pride, or else you'll be beaten into the ground. You will have to put your head into the ground like an ostrich. Here's what happened to me. My particular guilty pleasure is that of music, specifically music from a few decades ago, the 1980s. Okay. I love the 80s, like a goofy show, right? It's all me. Now, I've carried this through to the 90s and 2000s and borne the stigma at the times in which it wasn't cool and had the laudations and plaudits of when it was cool. The thing is this, I just don't like just any 80s music. I like the real kind of corny emo-like music. My sister, who happens to be about a decade older than me, even though we're brother and sister, kind of a pseudo-generation older, really like was high up on the emo, like Duran Duran, Depeche Mode, what have you. When I was in 2nd and 3rd grade, she was in high school going through a Depeche Mode phase. Okay, so what happened was I had friends in 3rd grade, and they were listening to, like, The Boss. I had a friend from kindergarten who brought Quiet Riot to show and tell. So I'm not making this up, it was really kind of a little awkward. And I had friends who, they were listening to Metallica. They even posed their fully posable G.I. Joe action figures to simulate one, like Johnny Got His Gun, like the whole, like the exciting Metallica song. Well, whereas I, on the other hand, had my fully posable action figures from an old franchise called Mask, not to digress, but this was a competitor with Transformers, but it was better. And I don't know if any of you guys were into Mask back then, but I had a character named Vampire, he was one of the, he wasn't a vampire, he was before this whole in vogue of vampires, but he was like a bad guy, and he wore all this red leather on his like jacket and pants, and he had a real mean sneer on his face for a plastic Kenner action figure. But I had him singing Depeche Mode, and I used to fully pose him, it's a guilty pleasure of mine, on the fireplace, and I had him sing, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Depeche Mode, but I'll sing a few bars. I had him go, like, while they were doing one, I would have my evil vampire figure go, like, here's the plea from my lord to you, nobody knows me as well as you do, and like, so that was like the whole Depeche Mode phase. So here's what happened. I had a couple weaknesses, though, and a couple hardships and tribulations as I carried the banner of 1980s love into the 90s. For one thing, you know that the early 90s, at least, were the antithesis of the 80s. Whereas the 80s were, like, you know, carefree and everything like that. The 90s were all angst-ridden, like, unnecessarily so. You had, like, your real, like, hard-up Pearl Jam, like that Pearl Jam, whatever, they're, like, full of themselves. And really, the 80s were stigmatized by that point. It was around this time where I suffered my major tribulation. But let me explain to you also first, I had an anxiety. I wanted to seek approval back then from almost every single cashier at record stores. There's like this anxiety, you know, you get to record stores and you're checking out your wares and they're like, oh, this is a good album. And it's like, sometimes I suffered, like, you know, I would bring something to South Street, actually this happened not too long ago, I got, like, Guided by Voices. Like, Guided by Voices, they're pretty cool, but, like, the cashier didn't even so much as, like, freaking flinch at this. I was very crestfallen. But then what happened was, weeks ago, not to digress too much, I was getting into Rush, and they're playing in a few months, but, like, you know, $195 tickets, no price too high to see Rush, I guess, you know. They're great. So I get Rush's signals, and I go to the cashier's, like, he's like, oh, the guy next to the cashier says, what's on this? And the cashier's like, everything. So I felt really proud of myself. But here's what happened. Here's the main course. In the 1990s, I would go to what's known back then as The Wall, formerly known as Wall-to-Wall Sound and Video, in the wonderful, illustrious 80s. And I pick out an album. I got to catch up on some old album work that had lost or was played out to death on cassette. I'm getting another cassette version of an early Duran Duran album. Which I will, the name of which I will stylistically reveal to you through the story in another few moments. But it contains such hits as Save a Prayer and The Chauffeur. I take this to the cashier and I'm ready to bear the stigma because, again, this is the early 90s. And the cashier is very, very impassive about this. But who walks in but this really strange abomination of a person? He's like the love child of, like, Mr. Blackwell of music taste. He was a fashion junkie. And just some hobo or something like that. And I'm at the cashier, at the cash register, and this guy comes in right as I'm bringing the Duran Duran album up. He's like, hey, what's up, man? How you doing? What's going on? What you got there? So then I'm like, and I I have a long pause, and I'm just like, Rio? Like Duran Duran's Rio. So I'm afraid of all the stigma. And the guy's like, oh. Like the guy who's visiting, like this seemingly drunk guy, whatever. So I bear his stigma. So, and what I should have done, this is the moral of the story, I should have been like really proud of it, and I should have sung some bars from, like, for example, My Own Way, if anyone knows Rio. You know, like, I got my own way! But instead, I went to bury my head in the sand, I started to walk off. Now, the wall was known for these very transparent glass, like so many wall outlets, transparent glass walls, no pun intended. And I went smack right into the glass partition because I was so self-conscious about having been stigmatized. Paradoxically, upon walking out of the wall, I walked directly headlong into the wall. The moral story, again, okay, you have to be proud, you have to wear it on your sleeve with pride, your guilty pleasures. Or else, you know, like karma and fate will punish you. Thank you.